Before supermarkets, this is how American backyards saved families. There was a time when American backyards weren't just for mowing, barbecues, and the occasional 4th of July fireworks. They were alive. Rows of vegetables, herbs hanging to dry, grapevines twisting over wooden arbors, and kids playing beneath bean teepees. These gardens weren't just for food, they were the heartbeat of the home, a place where families worked, gathered, and shared what they grew. Today, we're unearthing 15 lost garden features that once defined everyday American life, and why reviving them might just be the most powerful thing we can do now. 15. Cold frames. Before greenhouses were ubiquitous, gardeners made do with something much simpler: cold frames. These were miniatures of low-to-the-ground greenhouses constructed from wood and salvaged window panes. They operated on the principle of trapping sun heat, producing a warm microclimate that enabled gardeners to start seeds earlier in spring and continue greens on through winter. No electricity or specialized equipment necessary, just some know-how and an eye for finding free materials. Many families used old storm windows or glass doors, propping them slanted over a wooden box for maximum sun. The right cold frame could transform an early spring morning into a 70-degree hothouse for lettuce, spinach, and carrots. With store-bought produce within their reach, though, the use of cold frames declined. Nowadays, you'd be hard-pressed to spot one in the typical suburban yard, although it remains an intelligent method for extending a growing season. Cold frames were invaluable in early American settlements for extending the harvest, guaranteeing families access to fresh greens even in the worst winters. Reviving the practice helps us tap into an era when self-sufficiency was an American identity. 14. The backyard bean teepees. Long before plastic jungle gyms and playhouses, kids had something much better: a bean teepee. All that took were several tall sticks or bamboo poles lashed together at the top and runner beans sewn at the base. This simple construction transformed in short order from mere sticks and poles into a shady, living hideout. The vines crawled up the poles, smothering the teepee in bright green leaves hung with bean pods. It was fun for kids, yes, but also useful, a reliable harvest of green beans all season. Parents enjoyed that they kept the kids occupied and in touch with nature. But with gardening going out of style and plastic playthings crowding the backyard, bean teepees began fading away. Now, they're an old-time rarity. If you have grandkids, though, here's one feature of your garden worth reviving. Bean teepees in the heart of America represented the intersection of play and work, instructing youngsters in the worth of tending something. Bringing them back can create a sense of magic and accountability with the next generation. 13. Victory gardens. Almost every home in America had a victory garden in the time of World War II. The concept of the victory garden was simple. Producing your own crops relieved the strain on commercial foods and helped with the war effort. It wasn't about being patriotic, it was about being self-sufficient. Families planted tomatoes, carrots, lettuce, and potatoes in their front yards. Even the urban dwellers utilized rooftops and community lots as they did their bit. The practice hung on after the war for some time, but as supermarkets reached out with processed foods as the rule, the vegetable garden in the front yard began disappearing. Today, individuals are slowly discovering the advantages of producing their own produce. But the victory garden as national movement? That's all but lost. Bringing back victory gardens today could promote community pride and resilience, recalling the spirit of national effort that once brought America together in tough times. 12. Rhubarb patches. Each old garden had its standard feature item, the rhubarb patch. Hidden away in some forgotten corner near the garage or fence line, these tough little plants came back year after year, no matter what neglect they endured. Rhubarb is tough. It can take hard winters, needs little attention, and yields dense, tart stalks ideal for pies, jams, and sauces. Years ago, it was a standard item in homemade desserts, usually combined with strawberries for that great sweet-tart balance. Today, though, rhubarb is all but gone from backyards. Folks either don't have the patience to wait for it to take hold or just don't think about planting it. Go visit an old farmhouse, though, and chances are good that you will still find an old, forgotten rhubarb patch clinging on. Rhubarb, in America's culinary past, seemed like more than just a plant. It was an initiation for many home bakers. Getting it back involved could bring us closer to traditional American foods and gardening ways. 11. Companion planting. Before pesticides and fertilizers, gardeners used something much more simple: companion planting. The concept was that some plants benefited from each other when planted side by side. Bugs were repelled from tomatoes by marigolds. Tomatoes tasted sweeter with basil. Beans fixed nitrogen for the corn in the soil, while squash helped shade the ground from weeds. This wasn't an old wives' tale. It was generationally passed down knowledge and what worked. When commercial agriculture replaced traditional gardening in backyards, the knowledge diminished. Now, in its quiet revival, most contemporary gardeners use bought solutions. Using companion planting is restoring an important part of the United States' agricultural heritage, encouraging biodiversity and sustainability. It's proof of the ingenuity of early American farmers who persisted in working in harmony with nature. 10. Root cellars. Prior to the advent of refrigerators, vegetables were stored the old-fashioned way, in a root cellar. These underground storage facilities remained cool throughout the year, keeping potatoes, carrots, onions, and other root vegetables fresh for months. Some even included areas for apples, cabbages, and canned foods. It was an efficient, energy-saving method of keeping foods fresh. However, as houses were constructed without basements, root cellars fell out of use. Today, some self-sufficiency advocates and homesteaders are resurrecting them. For the majority of us, though, the notion of a root cellar is nothing more than something learned in school. Root cellars in early American homesteads were the key to surviving through chilly winters, keeping foods secure. Bringing them back could mark an attempt toward sustainable living and self-sufficiency in contemporary America. 9. Grape arbors. There once were many backyards with a wooden arbor full of dense, curly grapevines. They were dripping with luscious fruit in the middle of the summer, ripe for just picked eating, for juice, or for winemaking. These arbors offered natural shade, pollinating insects, and just plain beauty. They were the pride of many gardeners. Fresh grapes, though, were something later purchased from the market. Backyard grapevines disappeared, being replaced with fences and bedding. With enough room, however, planting an arbor for grapes could be one of the simplest ways of introducing some old-fashioned charm, as well as some fresh fruit back into your yard. Grape arbors in immigrant communities in America were an introduction to ancestral ways used for winemaking in their homes. Bringing them back pays tribute to the multicultural tapestry that informed American gardening. 8. Asparagus beds. One other plant that found its way into nearly every garden was asparagus. Asparagus is not like other vegetables, though. With asparagus, you don't plant it in the first year and pick from it in the second. It takes 3 years, typically, before it actually starts producing. Once planted, though, an asparagus bed can last decades. Some older garden beds are over 50 years old and continue producing fresh spears in the spring. Families planted asparagus in the past because they recognized that asparagus represented an investment for the long term. Now, with everybody in such a rush for immediate gratification, not everybody is willing to wait. And that's unfortunate, because if you plant an asparagus bed today, 20 years from now, your family will be eating from it. Asparagus beds represented foresight and patience in American horticulture, values of planning for generations. Reviving that practice could provide some of our rapidly changing world with a sense of legacy, continuity. Sev, the buried clay pot. This is old, 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 and not common, but it cropped up in old American homes, particularly in the Southwest. Gardeners would set unglazed clay pots, called ollas, with just their tops exposed in the ground, and fill them with water. The water seeped out slowly through the permeable clay directly into the soil where roots could sip as they needed. It conserved water, promoted deep roots, and took nearly no effort. With no timers or drip irrigation in sight, this was absolute brilliance and largely lost. Now, some permaculture designers are finding out about it all over again, but its users may have included your great-great-grandparents without even having named it. Ollas are just another example of early American gardening ingenuity, particularly in dry areas where water did not grow on trees. The unobtrusive efficiency harks back to an age when every drop counted, when producing food involved cooperating with nature, not in opposition. 6. Cloche covers. Before plastic tunnels and garden cloth, gardeners shielded young plants with cloches, little glass or plastic jug-shaped covers. They functioned like little mini greenhouses, protecting seeds from frost, insects, and abrupt weather shifts. Walking through a springtime garden used to be like passing through an army of little greenhouses glistening in the sunlight. They seemed like magic, like snow globes standing in the dirt. But with the decline of gardening as an interactive activity, the cloche vanished. Nowadays, folks use commercial row covers, or, in reality, just plant later in the season. Still, though, something is lost in the old method: its simplicity, elegance, and effectiveness. In America's past, cloches were a sign of serious gardeners, those who started their gardens early and took pride in nurturing each plant from seed. Their disappearance reflects our shift away from craftsmanship and toward convenience. 5. Stink buckets. All right, here's one for the hardcore gardeners: the infamous stink bucket. Folks would drop nettles, comfrey leaves, or even fish trimmings into a bucket of water, let them sit and rot for 2 or 3 weeks, then strain out the liquid. The end result? A rich liquid fertilizer chock full of nutrients. It reeked, of course, but the garden just loved them. It wasn't attractive. It wasn't in some bag from the store. But oh, did it deliver! Today, people are squeamish, and nurseries have shelves full of fragrance-free plant feed. But old-time gardeners knew, the funkier the bucket, the richer the dirt. Early American farmers used these brews as family heirlooms, with every family swearing about their secret combination. They remind us that great soil is not from a plastic bottle, it is from working with your hands. 4. Onion braids. After being harvested, onions weren't discarded in plastic crates. They were woven together with their tops in cool, dry areas such as sheds, basements, or even kitchen pantries. These twisted ropes of onions were not only functional, they were lovely. A well-braided onion was proud work and visual reminder that the garden had given us. Now, onions are what you're usually likely to find in mesh sacks from the store, but some heirloom farmers and some homesteaders continue the practice. If you have ever spotted one in an old farmhouse, then you know that in addition to being a storage device, it is a work of art. Rural America braids served dual purposes as both adornments and preparedness for tough winters when available foods were limited. They narrate their story of harvest joy and thankfulness embedded in every turn. 3. Strawberry patches. If you spent some of your summers in your grandparents' house, then surely you have memories of finding small sun-kissed strawberries in a patch that seemed to grow bigger year after year. Whereas store-purchased strawberries were developed for size and shelf quality instead of taste. Homegrown strawberries were small, juicy, and full of honest sweetness. The downside is that strawberries take some patience. The plants take 12 months to mature before they actually produce fruit, then start spreading in great quantities, sending out arms that make new fruiting plants. For previous generations, this was an asset, since soon they had all the strawberries they could eat with little work. Today, individuals will shell out $5 for a plastic clamshell of fruit instead of producing them in their own yard, unaware of the fact that an individual strawberry bed will yield fruit for years. Strawberries in America used to mean abundance and rebirth, ripening just as school let out for the summer. Reviving them is like restoring an element of youth and a sweeter lifestyle. 2. Cloth spin herb hangers. When they were ripe for drying, herbs such as sage, oregano, rosemary, and thyme were tied in bunches and hung from rafters or string lines with old-fashioned clothespins. The aroma was amazing, like entering from the outdoors into an aromatic apothecary. The bunches would air dry over the course of weeks, then be crushed into jars or repurposed for stewing and steeping. These bunches served as decoration in homes too, hung in kitchens or mudrooms as rustic green chandeliers. Now, we tend to use neatly packaged herbs from supermarket shelves in uniform tins and jars. But not so long past, dried herbs told personal stories and stories of place. In colonial times, this was an integral aspect of domesticity, with herb racks, both practical items and symbols of the knowledge of a home. Rediscovering this practice can bring us back in touch with flavors and traditions that shaped generations. 1. Tomato parade. One of the great joys of old-fashioned gardening wasn't what you planted, it was what you shared. When tomato vines exploded in August, you didn't let the surplus go bad. Instead, you packed a basket and took them over to the neighbors. It wasn't unusual for individuals to drop zucchinis on doorsteps, exchange cucumbers for eggs, or exchange canning jars with friends down the street. Today, we take photos of our harvests on social media. Back then, the reward was in the sharing, feeding your community from your backyard. That sort of sharing? It's one of the greatest garden traditions we have ever known, and perhaps the one we need the most today. A practice in small-town America created some of the strongest of bonds that were far stronger than fences. Neighbors were made extended family through simple acts. Reviving produce sharing could be the seed of rebuilding community in an age of disconnection. These garden features didn't just grow food, they grew family, community, and resilience. In old America, the backyard was survival. Today, it could be again. If this sparked a memory, give it a like. Subscribe for more forgotten traditions worth bringing back. And tell us in the comments, what garden memory do you wish more people remembered? Because the best way to honor the past is to plant it in the present.